We're reading from the JewishPhilanthropy.com website, Jewish Insider. The Jewish Diversity and Mizrahi Jews, September 16, 2019, by Sarah Levin. When I first started my work at Jamina, Jews indigenous to Middle East and North Africa, an organization committed to advancing and protecting the heritage and history of Mizrahi and Sephardic Jews. I had the opportunity to sit with the prominent member of the San Francisco Bay Area Jewish community and introduce her to our works. Halfway through our meeting, she interrupted and said, "So Jimna is an organization for Jews of color?" I replied, "Jimna doesn't focus on issues of race, but on ensuring heritage and history of Mizrahi and Sephardic Jews incorporated into mainstream Jewish life." She looked at me genuinely confused. I reflected back on the meeting. It's quite clear to me that this professional didn't fully understand the difference between race and ethnicity. It's likely that in her mind, all Jews who weren't of Eastern European Ashkenazi descent are automatically coded in the Jews of color, including Mizrahi Sephardic Jews. Within the Jewish community, I've observed that the conflation of Jews and ethnicity and the tendency of Jewish organizations and professionals to socially categorize Sephardic and Mizrahi Jews and non-white Jews together into a lump binary happens often and tend to be problematic in the eyes of many Mizrahi and Sephardic leaders. Mizrahi and Sephardic Jews are currently racially diverse, but have rarely defined themselves in racial terms. It's far more common for Mizrahi and Sephardic Jews to identify collectively and individually in ethnic terms. While there are North African Mizrahi and Sephardic Jews who identify as Jews of color, especially amongst younger generations, it's safe to assume that the large percentage are functionally white and identify as such. One of the problems Sephardic and Mizrahi scholars and activists face is a lack of empirical data to help us better understand our communities. For many years, the Jamina Jewish Foundation and partner organizations have asked us to provide demographic statistics on Sephardic and Mizrahi Jews in North America. It's been incredibly frustrating that we've never been able to adequately meet a single request for information, as no empirical data on our communities exist. While Mizrahi and Sephardic Jews were intentionally excluded from the recent counting inconsistencies surveys conducted by the Jews of Color Field Building Initiative, the results of the study provided useful information affirming that Mizrahi and Sephardic Jews, like Jews of color, have been vastly undercounted, miscounted, and inconsistently included in Jewish demographic studies across the board. So this here is for something that brothers like Orthodox Moore and Yeshua need to understand. These guys need to understand that. They need to understand, that like the Jews of color, the Jews, they didn't understand that they have vastly been undercounted and miscounted and inconsistently included in Jewish demographic studies across the board. This is the reason that Yeshub and Orthodox more want to take it upon themselves and get mopped up because they think that I'm stupid and can't read. They think that I don't know this, right? And they wanna continue to press these arguments from ignorance. You know, arguments where there is no evidence. You dig what I'm saying? And there's no evidence because of the inconsistencies included in demographic studies across the board. We've been miscounted. We've been misrepresented. I mean, these are facts. And these are the reports from the Gemini Jewish organization. Say because so little reliable research has been concluded and conducted, Gemini has relied heavily on ant- antecedential research, and it's very likely that Mizrahi and Sephardic Jews and their descendants constitute the largest ethnic majority group amongst American Jews. We know that the Sephardic and Mizrahi Jews are occupying greater spaces in organized Jewish life and in Jewish day schools. Yet Sephardic and Mizrahi projects, organizations, and thought leaders are still underfunded, underutilized, and at the time, tokenized. Jewish institutions yet have to design much needed programs and policies to ensure the inclusion of Sephardic and Mizrahi Jews. Most troubling is that as attention towards Jewish diversity is finally growing, Sephardic and Mizrahi Jewish leaders are frequently left out of initiatives, conversations, and projects that address and advance issues of Jewish diversity and inclusion. So basically, the European Jews are controlling everything. All of the research about Jewry, the black Jews are excluded and undercounted and misrepresented, right? The marginalization of Sephardic and Mizrahi individuals, communities, and heritage is indicative of a much older and deeper problem that demands a challenging exploration and confrontation if the American Jewish community is to commit fully itself to building truly diverse and inclusive communities. Dr. Devin Naar, chair of the Sephardic Studies program at University of Washington and prominent Sephardic Jewish leader, explores this issue in a recent article published in Jewish Currents titled Our White Supremacy Problem. In the end of the article, he posits that confronting the deep-seated and disturbing history of intra-Jewish prejudice is a prerequisite for the empowerment of Sephardic and Mizrahi Jews and Jews of color in Jewish spaces, and for a reckoning with the place of most Jews as targets of and willing and unwilling accomplices to the structure of white supremacy. Only a Jewish commitment to dismantle white supremacy will do justice in our own histories, keep our own communities safe, and fashion new foundations upon which to rebuild American and American Jewish society. Sadly, it was not uncommon for older generations of Sephardic and Mizrahi Jews in North America to experience blatant prejudicial attitudes directed towards them by non-Sephardic Jewish peers. And their attitudes have evolved into systematic indifferences and disconnect. Today, younger generations of Sephardic Today, younger generations of Sephardic and Mizrahi Jews are more likely to be embraced for their differences. However, despite shifting attitudes, these younger generations never see the Middle East or North African Jewish heritage reflected back to them in Jewish spaces. White supremacy. The tendency of the mainstream Jewish community to gloss over the voices of communal experiences of Sephardic and Mizrahi Jews while socially categorizing ethnically and racially diverse Jews together in a similar binary of Jews of color indicted a vulnerability towards the white-black binary paradigm is a counterproductive to building an inclusive Jewish community that reflects the ethnic and racial diversities within younger generations of American Jews are far more likely to hold multiple racial, ethnic, and religious identities, and the Jewish community need to move towards a non-binary paradigm that receives and reflects the growing diversity, interactions, and experiences of younger generations. Despite the adversity and perhaps unattended erasure Mizrahi and Sephardi Jews have faced, rarely have our communities defined themselves by hardship and experiences of marginalization. It is far more common for Mizrahi and Sephardi Jews to be guided and self-defined by an incredible pride of our unique cultures, contributions, and ancient Judaic studies and community practices that are relevant to issues of diversity, inclusion, and belonging. This continues to ground many Jews of Sephardic and Mizrahi descent in approaching and thinking about issues of diversity and inclusion, and provides a relevant lens for the larger Jewish community to explore these important issues. I want to end this on a high note, as there is much to be optimistic about. Jewish professionals are finally expressing an interest to integrate Sephardic and Mizrahi modalities into the programming, and there is a wealth of Sephardic content and leadership ready to support them. There are wonderful Jewish foundations who genuinely understand the unique intersections Mizrahi and Sephardi Jews dwell in and are invested in efforts to elevate Sephardic and Mizrahi initiatives and thought leaders. Most meaningfully, there are more and more professionals who have expressed a desire to listen and learn from American Sephardic and Mizrahi Jews who are tirelessly trying to reclaim and share their integral elements of Jewish heritage that has been orientalized, acculturated, and sidelined to the point of erasures. Our communities are getting closer towards an embrace of Jewish diversity. But until Sephardic and Mizrahi Jews are giving a growing seat in every single Jewish table, at every single Jewish table, especially ones focused on inclusion, diversity, and parallelism, the cat the, the catchphrase Jewish diversity and inclusion loses its authenticity, and has very little meaning. Sarah Levan is an executive director of Jimna, Jewish indigenous to the Middle East and Jews indigenous to the Middle East and North Africa, an advocacy and educational institution dedicated to raising awareness to Sephardic and Mizrahi Jews. Sarah has conceptualized and developed a number of campaigns for projects for Mizrahi and Sephardic Jews to explore, preserve, and protect their heritage and diverse identities. So we can see here clearly that the Jews has been that the Jews of color has been marginalized. They have been excluded. They have been miscounted and misrepresented, in Jewish studies across the Jewish world, including genetic studies.